Welcome to another episode of Conscious Business Connections, brought to you by the New York City chapter of Conscious Capitalism. My name is Bob Caporale, and I'm joined today by Aaron Walker of Camelback Ventures, located in New Orleans. Aaron is a former New Yorker, which is the connection as to why the New York City chapter is here. But Aaron's doing some great things all across the country, so wanted to talk to him today. And Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, you bet. It's great. I know we have a lot of great things to talk about. But as you know, what we try and do on this program is we try and feature companies that other companies can learn from. Conscious capitalism is all about, embracing the idea that capitalism could be a good things if companies practice it in a conscious way. And there's several different ways that they can do that. I know that you're embracing almost all of the philosophy that we have, if not every single tenet. But what we want to do here is really share your story so that other people can be inspired and learn by that and so forth and learn from that. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what Camelback Ventures is, what you guys do, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, definitely. So Camelback seeks to increase access to opportunity and capital for entrepreneurs of color and women through direct investment in their companies and by advocating for fairness in their funding. So that's a really fancy way of saying that we essentially run an accelerator program where we write uh, checks to early stage entrepreneurs and so try to give them access to capital that way. And we say that we're the friends and family for
Mhm.
people who don't have it. When you're first getting started and people say, well, how much did you raise from friends and family? If you come from a low income background, or you might even be the first in your family to go to college, oftentimes you are your friends and family. And so when you're
Yeah.
trying to start a business, where do you go to get that money? And, we want Camelback to be one of those places for people who don't have it in their network. But in
Interesting.
addition to the money comes a whole set of wraparound supports that we provide to help them grow themselves, but also their company.
So this is really great, and I want to talk a lot more about why this problem exists and some of the things you're doing specifically. But just to make sure people understand, are you funding or are you teaching? Like, what's the purpose of Camelback when someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm looking for money"? What role do you play?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. I mean, we write $40,000 checks,
Hmm.
so that's the funding piece. And then oftentimes there's like this teaching component. So we work with them for 6 months. Everyone we work with gets a coach. We have a curriculum that we walk through that we think is applicable to all entrepreneurs, no matter what kind of business that you're starting.
Yep.
And so we walk entrepreneurs through that curriculum and sort of try to help them grow their ability to pitch and to hire and to develop relationships and to build strategic plans. And so really our job is both. Is to
Yeah.
fund, but also to provide non-financial support.
Got it. So because $40,000 can make a huge difference, obviously, but I imagine that there are companies that would approach you that you'd work with that need more than that, maybe need to go to the next level as well, right? So do you kind of help them get there also?
Yeah, so we have worked with 80 entrepreneurs. We put in about $4 million combined into those companies. They've gone on to raise over $60 million in follow-on funding.
Wow.
And so some of that is from connections that we've made for them. Obviously, some of it is just like as they grow, they expand their network, and they're able to pick up other funding, other clients. And so we can't take all the credit for that. But yeah, what we really want to do is we want to be a really strong beginning. So if a dollar from Camelback can turn into $15 from someone else, or you increase your profits by $15, we feel like we've done our job there.
That's awesome. So it's really like giving people that head start that they might not have access to otherwise, which is really
Exactly.
incredible. So, before we get into some of these gaps that I know that your company is filling and that you've already started to talk about, there's always a backstory, right? Like kind of why you got into this and how this all started. Tell us a little bit about that. What was the beginning like?
Definitely, definitely. So Camelback is the third company that I have started.
Wow.
And I feel like over the last decade or so, I've seen the breadth of entrepreneurial results from a company that came and went in 18 months to a company that I was building. And I was like, I actually could do this, but I don't want to spend 15 years of my life on this problem.
Right.
And I think that's important, right? Because like as an entrepreneur, you only have so much time, and so I feel like you should really tackle problems that you're really passionate about.
Yep.
And then this company I've been running since for the last 7+ years, and really it was two things. One was just thinking about my experiences in my first two companies,
Hmm.
and sort of seeing just how challenging it is to be an entrepreneur. But I think when you sort of layer on top of that some of the challenges being from a marginalized background, whether it's being a person of color in my case, I think for other people it might be around their gender identity.
Hmm.
Um, and just saying, man, there is so much talent out here that is being untapped, that's being underutilized, that's undervalued in entrepreneurship. And what would it mean if we could give those entrepreneurs uh, a good start?
Right. So excellent. So it was partly your own experience, but then also your passion, right? That kind of led you to this purpose, which I think is amazing. I was reading your bio on your website, and there were so many things that struck me that I'd love to unpack. But
Yeah.
just to point out one, I read that your hero was Jackie Robinson, right? And that there was, maybe you could share with us the quote that you quote there, if you remember, as to why he was so inspirational to you.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm going to get this right. I think it is that a life is only important life is as important as the impact it has on others, essentially. And I feel like that has been sort of my North Star and my guiding light, since I started my professional career, from being a teacher to going to law school and practicing law, and how can I use my skill set in that aspect to what I'm doing now, which is for me, like the days that are the most exciting and sort of keep me going are when I'm on my social media feed and I see some amazing thing that our entrepreneur has done, or someone sends me a call or text message about they finally broken through and raised $1 million, or their company now is $1 million company. Like those are the things that get me excited. And so is and maybe it's just like the frustrated teacher in me, all these years later, but like what really drives me to keep going is knowing that I played some role and being able to put other folks in a position to be successful and reach their goals.
Yeah, it's amazing. And thank you for saying the quote. You see, I diverted it to you because I don't know that I would have gotten it exactly right, but I'm sure you did. But I just love that story and that inspiration. It really, really talks to this. One of the principles of conscious capitalism, obviously, is higher purpose, right? And really talks to your higher purpose and what inspired you and why you're doing this, which is amazing. So I want to talk a little bit about the problem now, right? That you are trying to solve. And we hear this a lot. I cannot claim to be an expert in some of the stats and things of that nature, but clearly there is an issue, right, with, as you say, people of color, minorities, people from different backgrounds, underprivileged backgrounds, whatever it is, having access to capital in some cases. Tell us a little bit about that problem. Why do you think that exists, and how bad is it?
Yeah. So I mean, when you look at the data and the statistics, I mean, you have less than 10% of all. I mean, this is like conservatively less than 10% of all venture capital going to people of color. Even if you start to break that down by gender, Black women are receiving less than 1% of venture capital, even though you know Black women are graduating from college at the highest rate of any demographic group in our country, are starting businesses at a faster rate than any demographic group in our company. And so when you begin to look at stats like that, it just doesn't compute. And I think the reason why is just like the amalgamation of like the historical and current day racism that we sort of see every day, which is wealth has been passed down in certain communities. People invest in folks who look like them, and sort of the closed networks that exist there. And so those things begin to perpetuate on top of themselves, and then we sort of call it pattern matching, you
Yeah.
know which is, well, I worked before, but the thing is, in my eyes, you know we've been ignoring 67% of the population
Yeah,
for.
with some amazing ideas and a lot of capability and strength, right? Where and I think it's interesting from my standpoint, again, not being an expert in this, but it just makes sense to me that that people, maybe they're not, and maybe it's not an intentional thing, right? I don't know. Maybe in some cases it is. Maybe in some cases it is. In some cases it isn't. But it feels like, yeah, people run in circles with people that look like them, similar backgrounds, whatever else. And so if that's where the wealth is concentrated, then the wealth continues to concentrate there, right? And that's a problem that needs to be solved. So the part that you guys do with the money, that's obvious. What about the education part? I mean, I would imagine education on the part of the entrepreneur is important, but is there an educational aspect on the part of the investors as well that can happen? What do you think there?
Definitely. I mean, when we look at our portfolio, what we've seen is that the founders that we work with, and 95% of our CEOs are people of color, and 60% of them identify as women. And so that's like the demographic makeup. When we look at their companies, what we see is that they have more revenue 12 months after leaving Camelback when compared to their white counterparts and more male counterparts.
Mhm.
They have hired just as many employees. They have more diverse teams across race and gender. If you start to track some of their impact metrics, whether you're using like the UN SDG or others, they're performing just as well, if not better, but they're getting outraised 3 to 1. And so what that looks says to me when we look at it is, well, it can't be about traction. Right?
Right.
Sometimes you have these conversations like, well, maybe their business is not making as much money, or maybe this, or maybe that. And so we have a 5-year data set with 80 plus companies that basically says that's not the case, right? It's
Right.
not the case. And so what's the rationale for investing 3 times as much in a company that has the same, if not worse results? But the common identifier is that it's led by someone who tends to be more white and tends to be male.
Yeah.
And so we realize that the entrepreneur work is important. But in some ways, the investor work is just as, if not more important, because what happens is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so the
Right.
I love to use is putting gas in your car. If you put $1 of gas in my car and I'm driving a Porsche,
Yeah.
but you put $3 of gas in your car and you're driving a Pinto,
Yeah.
well, you're you're going to make it further every single time, even though you have a Pinto and I have a Porsche, right? And
Right.
so then what ends up happening is we then begin to develop this narrative. See, he didn't make it as far. We shouldn't have done that. But the data, if we're just taking it as quote unquote objectively as we can, doesn't actually bear that out to be true. And so for us, we realize yes, we need to do this entrepreneurship work, but we also need to work on working with investors to change the water.
That to me is what resonates equally with the entrepreneur piece, because you talk to a lot of companies that are working with entrepreneurs, right? But at the end of the day, you have to imagine that people that are investing venture capital, whatever it is, they want a return, right? And so if you educate them on that, say, look, these are the real stats that people of color, minority businesses, these businesses are doing as well, and in many cases better than other businesses. This is a good investment, and educating people that it is a good investment seems like that would go pretty far, right? So how do you do that? I mean, what's the outlet? What's the vehicle to get to these investors and educate them on that kind of a thing?
So we've been at this work for 2 years, and at first we started with people who were saying, I know this is an issue, but I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And so kind of like the technology adoption curve, you don't start with the laggards. You're just like, well, we're gonna leave them over there.
Right.
On board soon enough, but now it's not the time.
Right.
So we started with folks who were sort of at earlier part of the curve, and we really focus on two things. One is allowing people, and most of the folks who go through the program, are white identifying, to actually go and do some of their own racial identity work. I
Mm.
mean, I think it's only recently where we begun to have conversations about like white identity and what that means. And the thing is, for my I think most white folks haven't really thought about their whiteness. It's not a conversation that's been had, because like when you are the norm, then you don't really have to think about like your group identity. But
Right.
we we have folks really talk about that and go through like the history of race in this country, just to help people understand how we even got here, right? Because I
Right.
think sometimes we just sort of take this ahistorical stance, like we woke up and it was 2020 and it was just awful.
Right. Right.
No, there were like intentional choices that were made over time, and I know there have been other folks who've written very cogently about this, about the GI Bill and the land grant system, and a bunch of policy decisions along the way, that redlining, that have served to deprive wealth and asset building in certain communities, and but also have been the wind that's sort of pushing that asset and wealth building forward for other communities, and just to make make sure that people really understand how we got here first. So that's one. And then two is we really ask them to go and look at their investment practices.
Yeah.
We walk through a whole series of activities with them to do that. And we understand it's not going to change overnight, right? We're not going to go from A to Z in a 6-month program, but can we begin to change something? Like, can you look at do you even have data on who you're talking to? Like, do you have
Right.
data on the geographies of where these companies are coming from?
So you can keep yourself in check at least, right?
Right.
So right, because and this is what I really believe that and I love the direction you're going. I mean, I'm sure that there are some people that consciously do things that are not good, right? But I think the vast majority probably are doing it out of ignorance, right? Or they don't know, they're not educated, they don't see certain things. And so it sounds like if you can bring them that data or encourage them to look at their own data, at least they can make different choices. Maybe. Do you agree with that? Or
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all are a product of the system that we are, that we were raised in. And so part of it though is being able to make plain what the system is, because sometimes, you know, like it's not obvious, and we don't sort of see the system for what it is, or we have words that sort of obscure what's really going on. And so for
right.
us, we are just trying to pull back that veil and sort of say, here's the data, here's the system, here's how it operates, here are the words that maybe sound neutral
Yep.
but actually aren't neutral, and here's why they're not neutral, to be able to sort of bring uh, entrepreneurs and investors to a new level of consciousness around this, to play on words here, a new level of consciousness around this.
Yeah, it's really important work, and I just I love the conversation, and I love the fact that you guys are doing this. Now, if we think about the work you're doing, and things that are happening now, this is very current, right? Do you see this trending in a better direction, or is it kind of flat, or how do you see the numbers going? I mean, since you are tracking the data and so forth.
Yeah, I think two things. One is we're gonna see like a lot of one step forward, two steps back, two steps forward, one step back, and
Mm,
we've begun to see that, right? So on the one hand, we've seen really great things happen. We had one of our investors email us recently and say, "Hey, before I started working with y'all in this program we call the Capital Collaborative, about 20%, and this was actually a grant maker, but 20% of my portfolio was I was investing in leaders of color, and a year later they're at 48%."
wow.
And so I think there are situations like that where we're excited and we're seeing progress, and we know it's gonna take one investor, one philanthropic organization, one high net worth individual at a time to get there. So in those ways, I feel really encouraged. I mean, I think there was a data set recently looking up at the percentage of money that's gone to women-led companies, and it's that it hasn't grown as much as we would have hoped it would have grown. And so, I still think when I see those things is that, like, yes, one at a time is great, but how can we so that in aggregate begin to see these numbers move? Because women make up 50% of the population, right? So
Yeah.
the fact that we're still in the single digits, and we're moving at 1% a year, 2% a year is not going to get us there.
Right, exactly. And I actually also really think that this idea of, again, education and really showing people what this can look like and what it looks like today, I think that's the key. But what I also like about this whole conversation is that, it's very easy to say you support something, but put your money where your mouth is, right? Let's see you investing in the things that you say you support. And I think that that's a really important takeaway. We're kind of getting close to the end of time here, but I want to make sure that we get to the part where if people want to adopt some of these principles, people want to do some of this stuff, what can they do, right? If you're an investor, you're a company, and you want to move the needle here, what do you suggest companies do as far as starting down this road?
Yeah. So I think three things you can do. One is begin to diversify your own network.
Hmm.
You Um, I'm going to get the exact percentage wrong, but something like 85 plus percent of white people in America uh, don't have like a diverse network,
Mm,
right? So one is like put yourself in places where you're going to meet people who you wouldn't necessarily normally meet, and I think Camelback can be one of those places.
it's great.
And we have a whole network where we can connect you to a whole bunch of other folks who are doing the same thing or
Yeah.
doing similar things. So I think that's one. Two is I think we just talked about it, which is begin to collect the data. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. Like if you're an investor, just keep track on a piece of paper. How many entrepreneurs did I talk to this week? Where are they from? What schools did they go to? Um, what is their racial background? What is their gender background? And just keep track of who you're talking to, who's sort of making it through your pipeline. And I think and then use that data to confront the brutal facts, right?
Right.
Because what I believe is that genius is equally distributed, but access is not. And
Right.
so if people really believe that genius is equally distributed, then you should be able to find ideas across the whole spectrum of human identity,
Right.
right? If you really believe that. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
and then three is, I think, to the point that you were making is just like make some investments, right? I think oftentimes we build up in our head like this idea that it's going to be so hard. One of the more inspirational things I saw last year was Mackenzie Scott, who gave away what $4 billion last year. And I know it wasn't an investment, but in many ways it was. Even though it's philanthropy, and we've been having these conversations for years around like how do you invest in economic opportunity, how do you invest in racial equity, and she did it $4 billion in a year with no foundation, with not a lot of hubbub. And I think what she showed everyone is that it's really just it's not hard, it's just a choice,
Right.
and that all you have to do is make the choice. And so I say look at someone like Mackenzie Scott, who I think has set a great example, and follow her path.
And that is how you start diversifying your network as well, right? Is that you start making investments, you start, getting interested in businesses that look and feel different than what you're used to. And I think that that's kind of the way this goes. And one of the things that I really appreciate about this conversation, about the way that you approach things, is it really is from an educational, data-based, kind of not an accusatory or angry position, but more of a position of, hey, educate yourself, right, and see what's out there. And I think that that is, in my opinion, at least the way to go. So hopefully that moves the needle quickly. I don't know how fast that will happen, but at least it will be a step in the right direction. Right.
Sort of one of those things where and I think you mentioned Jackie Robinson. One of my favorite sports growing up was baseball, and I mean, some argue that Babe Ruth is like the best baseball player of all time. I wasn't there. I can't really opine on that, but what I do believe is that it is a challenge argument to say when there was a whole swath of the population that wasn't allowed to play baseball.
Right. How do we know that anybody at that time was the best? Right. Yeah.
I think and I think about that example, and I sort of draw the analogy to entrepreneurship, which is like, yes, there are great entrepreneurs who are out there right now, but there are Robinsons and Satchel Pages and a whole bunch of other folks who are talented, who like the major leagues are missing out on,
Yeah.
because we sort of have this bifurcated system.
That is a really, really important analogy and a great one, I think, to end with. So, Aaron, thank you for all the great work you're doing and all the great education that you're providing, and for this conversation as well. I don't want to let you leave without you giving people a chance to find out where they can find out more about Camelback. So tell us where we can find out more.
Definitely. You can reach us online. Our website is camelbackventures.org. And then we also are on all social media channels, Camelback.org.
Excellent. Really great. Truly inspirational conversation. Aaron, thank you so much again for joining. For everyone out there, thank you for joining again. Hopefully you learned something you could apply. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe. Please tell your friends. Please share. The idea here is just to get the word out and hopefully bring this message and other messages like it to a bigger community. So hopefully you could help us in that endeavor. And while you're doing that, we'll see you back here on another episode of Conscious Business Connections. And Aaron, thank you once again. Hopefully we'll stay in touch as well.
Thank you, Bob.
All right. Take care, everyone.